Okay, let's step back in time. Picture this.
Hmm.
It's November 1919.
Right after the Great War.
Exactly. And there's this feeling, this deep exhaustion, but also this weird uncertainty in the air.
Yeah, the source we're looking at really paints that picture.
It does. It asks, how long can that kind of post-war nervous energy even last? People were facing new demands. Work was different.
And there was this restlessness, the author mentions it, like a soul-deep thing that even a vacation couldn't fix.
It really captures a specific mood, doesn't it?
Definitely. A world trying to, well, find its balance again.
So the source itself, it's an article from the Builder magazine,
November 1919.
and the title is Making Lodge Night Worthwhile.
Ah, okay. So someone inside an organization, maybe like a fraternal lodge, looking at its purpose right in that specific moment.
That's exactly it. And that's our goal for this deep dive, to really get into this text, understand the challenges they were talking about back then,
Within that kind of community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and see, well, what can we maybe learn from it today? For you, the listener, thinking about your own communities, your own busy lives, where purpose comes from.
It sounds like the author had a pretty direct question.
He did. He basically asks, in these busy days, what could something like Lodge Night, that regular meeting, actually mean to people?
And was it living up to whatever that potential was?
Right. Was it? It's a simple question, but you can tell it really weighed on him.
And his answer seems to be maybe not.
Well, yeah, it leans towards a lament. He really sets the scene first, those 1919 anxieties. He talks about the post-war strain affecting everyone, even mentions the working classes.
Make them oversensitive, I think is the word he uses.
Yes, oversensitive. And he connects that to what he called the so-called enticements of Bolshevism and other isms.
Okay, so that's very 1919 language, isn't it? Reflecting the political fears of the time.
Absolutely. It's him using the terminology of the era to describe these widespread social anxieties, fears of radical change. He's observing this kind of societal fragility.
But he doesn't just look outward.
No, he turns inward too. Asks some pretty tough questions about the war itself. Like, did focusing so much on winning, on brute force maybe, change people?
Make them more selfish, perhaps? Or less fair?
Yeah, exactly. He's wondering about the deeper impact on, character and values.
And that reflection, it sort of leads him to this really interesting comparison, doesn't it?
It does. He contrasts the lodge night he remembers from his father's time with what he's seeing in 1919. And he definitely feels something's been lost.
So what was his father's time like, according to him?
Oh, he paints this really warm picture, a time for real relaxation, sharing confidences, sort of haven.
Intimate fellowship. He even uses the word gossip, I think.
He does, in a positive sense, like close personal connection, caring about each other's lives.
And it wasn't just the formal meeting part?
Not at all.
Yeah.
He talks about the anteroom talk, just chatting before and after, social time, sandwiches, coffee, even sitting around a red-hot stove.
Huh. Yeah, the stove. Discussing everything, right? Settling all the great problems of the universe.
Exactly. And the key thing he says is, back then, nobody thought that was a waste of time. It served a purpose. It was the point, almost.
Okay, but the 1919 reality he describes sounds pretty different.
Oh, yeah. Stark contrast. Meetings scheduled just to get the formal stuff done. He uses that phrase, the degree mill can complete its work.
The degree mill. That's quite pointed.
It is. Degree here means like a step or level in the organization, usually with a ritual.
So calling it a mill suggests it's just churning people through, like a factory?
That's the feeling. Process over connection. Getting people through the steps, not necessarily building community or understanding.
And the result of focusing just on that mill?
Well, he says everyone's tired afterwards, they just rush home. Or if there is a social bit, like a banquet, it's full of long, barren, boresome talks.
Ouch. So speeches that just don't connect.
Right. His core complaint isn't just the time, it's the quality of the time. There's little of real fellowship, he says.
And the excuse people give?
Not time. Just too busy.
Ah, the classic excuse. But he doesn't buy it.
Not really. He
Yeah.
pushes back hard. Asks why is there not time? He thinks the lack of time for fellowship isn't the root problem.
It's a symptom.
Yeah, a symptom of having the wrong priorities.
Okay, and that brings us to his critique about being ritual worshipers only.
Exactly. And this is where he uses that analogy, the salesman and the Arkansas farmer.
Right, the farmer and the hog. Tell us that one.
So the salesman says, buy my stock food, your hog will fatten faster, save you time.
And the farmer's response?
Basically, what's time to a hog? He doesn't see the value in saving time for the hog.
It's a funny image, but his point is serious.
Very. He's saying if the organization just does the rituals, fattens the hog, so to speak, without understanding or applying the principles behind them.
Then it's like the farmer. No more progressive, missing the whole point of why they're doing it.
Exactly. Just going through the motions without the meaning.
And does he suggest a fix?
He does. He calls for a sane and up-to-date interpretation of the ritual, or maybe even trading some ritual time for, actual discussion and application.
So less focus on just the how and more on the why and the what next.
Precisely. He thinks tradition is empty if it doesn't lead somewhere real. And you still see that tension today, right? Organizations getting caught up in routines.
Oh, absolutely. Losing sight of the core mission in the day-to-day busyness, it's a timeless problem.
Totally. But he's not just knocking the present. He wants a return to what he sees as the original purpose. He traces the roots back to guilds, companies, or colleges of artificers.
Ah, the historical angle. So what were those early groups like in his view?
Not just social clubs, more like schools or maybe trade associations teaching practical things.
Led by skilled people, like an architect.
Yes, someone who's actually doing the work, applying principles.
And the membership terms, apprentice, fellow craft master, he sees those as important.
Very. He says they clearly denote progress, education, learning and growing within the craft.
Okay, so the lesson he draws from this history is...
Obvious and absurdly simple, he calls it.
Which is?
That the organization was meant to be about learning and applying principles to life, to work, building skill and character through that guided process.
Got it. So understanding that history makes his frustration with 1919 even clearer.
Definitely. He points out this paradox. The group has huge numbers, wealth, and the character of our membership. Like 2 million members, individually successful people.
Lots of potential, individually.
Right. But he feels that as a collective, as a group, they're so impotent, not making the impact they could or should be.
That's the strong word, impotent. He actually calls it arrested development, doesn't he?
He does. And he blames the leadership for not really grasping these fundamental truths, this historical purpose.
And for him, this internal problem, this stagnation, it has ripples outward.
Big time. He connects it directly to the wider world. He makes this bold claim about what America, the world, craves most without knowing it.
And what is that craving, according to the author?
It's the organization's priceless heritage. True brotherhood put into action.
So not just an idea, but brotherhood lived out.
Yeah.
Actively.
Yes. He sees it as this powerful force, something inherent in their founding ideas, maybe even linked to the nation's founding ideas. He believes it can actually heal the misunderstandings, direct the latent energies, and palsy the hand of hate.
Wow, that's a really ambitious vision for what this group could do in society, almost an activist role.
It really is. And that belief leads him to talk about national purpose. Again, looking back at history. He says, look, back when both the country and the fraternity were, weaker, less established, their Masonic forebears were right there, writing those documents and upholding our government.
So there was this active, direct link between the group's principles and civic life.
That's his point. But now, in 1919, he sees something different. He worries about an increasing number of people looking at the U.S. government itself as a monument of failure.
Feeling like that spirit of brotherhood or shared purpose has just oozed out of it.
Yeah, that's his phrase, oozed out. It captures this sense of disillusionment he perceives.
And that contrast between the engaged past and the disillusioned present, it fuels his next big idea.
It does. He puts forward this quite radical thought. Should every member see themselves as a kind of missionary?
A missionary? In what sense?
In behalf of this great governmental experiment, he says, basically actively promoting the principles they believe in out in the world in civic life.
And then he adds that little note of doubt, doesn't he?
He does. Right after calling it an experiment, he asks if, in fact, it remains an experiment any longer.
Which really highlights his concern about the state of things in 1919, the fragility he felt.
Exactly. It adds this real urgency to his call for members to be active.
So if they're supposed to be these missionaries, these exponents of principles, how does that happen?
Well, this brings him back to his core point. If members are going to be effective, they need to be taught how to actually do that efficiently.
Okay. And that leads to the big question hanging over the whole piece.
The crucial one. Who is going to teach them?
Right. It's a direct challenge, isn't it? To the leadership, to the organization itself. Who takes responsibility for equipping people to live these ideals?
Inside the lodge and, importantly, outside, too.
And he concludes pretty strongly on this.
Very. He says, look, this task, teaching, equipping, preparing members to put brotherhood into action that is worthy.
And that is what will ultimately make Lodge Night worthwhile.
Exactly. The value isn't just showing up for the routine. It's about what that time together enables people to do.
Looking back at it now, this piece from over a century ago, what really jumps out is that central tension, right?
Yeah, the disconnect he felt between the historical ideals fellowship, learning, applying principles, contributing, and the 1919 reality of, well, busyness, ritual focus, maybe a lack of deep connection.
It's such a powerful plea for leadership to really get the why and for members to engage in a way that actually translates ideals into action.
True brotherhood to action, both within their own group and out in the world.
And that final question he leaves hanging, who is going to teach them? It still feels relevant, doesn't it, for any group trying to live out its purpose?
It really does. It's about building that capacity, that understanding within a community.
It makes you think. Here's this author in 1919 wrestling with how to keep this group vital and meaningful in his time, asking who would teach members to be missionaries for their values.
So the question for you, listen now, how do the communities or organizations you're part of handle that same balance? You know, tradition versus active purpose, ritual versus real connection.
Yeah, what does it actually take to stop the core mission, the real why, from just getting lost in the shuffle, lost in the busyness, or just the comfort of doing things the way they've always been done?